Hi everyone, it's Marissa here from Rise High and
Lachlan Turner from Turner Real Estate. How are you?
And we're here to bring you your quarterly Adelaide property market update. So we're here to discuss the June quarter, which hasn't quite come to an end, but we're doing it a little bit early this year, just to sort of see what's been happening in the Adelaide property market for the last 3 months. What are we seeing from the real estate side, but also from the finance side? What is going on? Because obviously, you know, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, hasn't it? You know, over the last sort of, well, let's say 12 months, Lockie. And
yes.
I think by now a lot of people thought that we would have seen the end of the interest rates rises and they would have stabilised. But of course, we've had the recent rate rise again. There's a bit more uncertainty about when we're going to reach that end point, although it is approaching. So what's been going on in the Adelaide property market over the last few months, Lockie?
Well, I think what's happening, which is probably one of the factors that is making the RBA sit back and think and why they are raising the rates, is because the market or houses around the country are now on a bit of a rebound and they're starting to increase again in value. That's just one of the factors, I suppose. But so what we're seeing is a chronic undersupply of properties for people to buy and for people to rent. So the demand far exceeds the supply. What happens with any product in that situation or service is that they tend to go up in value. So we're certainly seeing a very hot market. If you own a property and you're an investor and you're trying to find a tenant, it's wonderful times. It truly is. If you own a property and want to sell it, it's also great times. It's just extraordinary how it's going. And I think with record levels of immigration this year and the undersupply, building approvals going down, builders going bankrupt and things, it's sort of a perfect storm of undersupply of properties. So we are going to see a continuation of the demand being much higher than the supply. And I think the prices, both for rent and for how much they're going to sell for, is going to certainly not go down. It's probably going to increase.
Yeah, and what we have seen is, you know, like you said, a lot of the markets across Australia are actually now going up. There was a period where the eastern seaboard was dropping. But of course, Adelaide remained actually above zero that whole time, haven't we? We haven't really had,
I think,
you know, and we're still powering strong, it seems.
Yeah, well, we did all the data, and there was 1 month since the beginning of this year where we were negative 0.1. So it's basically just flat line.
Yes.
Every other month we've been 0.1 or 0.2 or 0.3. So, but now we're starting. But I'll ask you, Marissa, what do you think is going to happen with interest rates? Are they going to go up a few more times?
I wish I had the crystal ball to say exactly what was going to happen. I mean, we were hoping the interest rates would stabilise by the middle of this year, so I don't think that's going to happen. And we've seen a lot of economists have revised where they think the top point is for interest rates. I think, you know, a lot of economists were hoping that inflation would be more under control by now than what it is. So we may still expect to see 1, maybe 2 more rate rises, but it's really hard to say when that end point is going to be. I mean, we're now starting to talk about, you know, will interest rates get up to those 7% marks? I don't think that's out of the question. So that's probably something, you know, as a...
What are they now, Marissa? 5.5% for a variable, or...?
Yeah, that's right. So they're sort of sitting around that, but, you know, for it to go up a little bit higher, I don't think it's out of the question. So people should definitely be budgeting for that extra rate rise ahead, and obviously planning ahead, you know, and that's something that people need to be aware of. So it's really interesting that, you know, that actually doesn't seem to be dampening demand, does it? Because like you said, there's still heaps of demand out there, but for some reason people aren't selling their properties. What do you think is putting the dampener on the sales side? Like, why isn't there enough stock and why aren't people putting their properties on the market?
Yeah, well, I think there's a few reasons. So with sellers, a seller also needs to feel absolutely comfortable with the market that they're selling in. So, I mean, a lot of the data we see is national, and I think that confidence for sellers is starting to re-emerge in the Sydney and Melbourne markets with an increase in their pricing. When it comes to Adelaide, I mean, we're always very much steady, and I think sellers are feeling okay. But I think the 2 factors that are never talked about for some reason is the fact that if I'm sitting there and I'm having a chat to my wife, or you're having a chat to James, your husband, and you're saying, oh, should we sell? It's like, yeah, but, you know, like, market's pretty good, but, you know, what if we can't find something, and or let's sell and rent first, But then people can't even find a rental, or if they can, it's extremely difficult and they've got to pay very high rent. So I think a big untalked about two factors is the fact that if we sell, what are we going to get into?
Yep.
A, we might not be able to find something for a very long time and we'll be out of a slightly rising market. And B, we might not even find a rental that we want because there's hardly any of those around. So I think the market's really stalled at the moment. And if you look at a key stat from RP Data CoreLogic, is the amount of properties for sale from exactly 1 year ago is down 21.5%. So the pie is tiny.
Wow.
And that was already down from quite low levels from years prior. It just seems to be getting less and less.
And that seems like a really logical argument as to why supply is so low, but it's hard to think about what the solution to that is, because, you know, we're now also starting to see more migration coming in from overseas, which is just going to increase demand even further and put further pressure on the supply chain. So what is the solution? Like, where is the light at the end of the tunnel for buyers and for renters?
Well, I think that, the best minds in Australia, if not the world, honestly, are trying to work it out, Marissa. It's a serious problem. The problem is, and not to be political in any way, but you kind of have to be a little bit, but it's, every party's the same. They're elected on a short-term basis. They all want to keep the economy strong. Unfortunately, with the record immigration numbers and the fact that housing has not been addressed for many years, is that it is a perfect storm where we don't have the infrastructure, roads, bridges, and housing generally for the population we've already got, let alone, the 500,000 people that are entering the country on top of that this year. And the governments introduced the migration to keep the economy strong, so that while we're basically stalling, if there's people, it produces just a natural amount of activity. So, they should have addressed the infrastructure issue first. What is the solution? It's just a rapid rebound of just land releases, approvals that are easy for builders to do high-rise, but also land releases to just build tens of thousands of properties as quickly as we can.
Yep.
That's basically what needs to happen. But that is going to take a couple of years.
That's going to take time,
minimum.
Isn't it?
That's why I think the best advice I can give is to simply plan.
Yes,
and be
that's
aware
really good
that
advice.
this is going on. Be aware that interest rates might keep going up, that the demand won't necessarily get easier.
Yep.
And to just consider that in your everyday life until we can get some sort of solution.
So what advice would you have to sellers in the current market right now, or to people that are considering selling? I mean, obviously you've just given a great tip of advice about planning, but is there anything specific to sellers that they should be thinking about? Now does seem like a great time to sell because prices are still so strong and going up, and like you said, there's so incredible. Much demand.
Yes,
so what would you say to sellers? Do you think it is a good time to sell, and what should they be doing if they're planning to sell?
Look, I think if you're an investor and you own a property, it is a great asset to own.
Yes.
And keep that.
Hold it.
Yeah.
Investors hold.
Because you're getting like a capital appreciation. You're actually, aside from that, which is a bit of an unsaid, you are actually providing housing for the community and people that are renting, where there's 8 million renters in Australia that they desperately need.
A great community service.
Yeah, you are also getting, and it's not great for tenants, but you're also getting a decent yield, and that is increasing as well, and you're getting the increase in, the capital value of the property. So, the vacancy rates are very low as well. So if you're an investor, it's a good asset to be in, and frankly, if you did get out of property, what else would you put it in? There's always that issue. So I think for them, keep it, but if you did have to sell for any reason, it is a good time. If you're just selling in general, you want to downsize or whatever, you can, it is a fantastic time. And I'm saying to my sales team, auction as many properties as possible. And I know not every seller loves it. There's a bit of anxiety, and I agree with all that. But it's about not just selling it and doing a private treaty and getting a couple of offers you think are pretty good. A lot of auctions we're doing at Turner Real Estate are exceeding vendors' expectations by like huge amounts, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, all depending on where the value sits of the property. So probably, and just make sure you tell the world, you use all of your marketing available to you, and you build a competitive situation. And so that's what I can say to sellers. It's good time. It's good time.
And there has been a lot more auction techniques used, you know, in the last sort of 12
Yeah.
months in Adelaide? Because Adelaide hasn't traditionally been a strong auction market compared to the eastern states. So that's
it sort of sits around 40 or
interesting to
50% of the
see.
market. Melbourne's more 70. Is higher. Sydney's higher as well.
I'm seeing
but
also
yeah.
a lot of expression of interest by a closing date type
Yeah.
sales techniques
So that's
being
just a
used,
private
which
treaty.
is just a really interesting.
Well, that's just a private treaty method of sale,
Yeah.
and there's really only two. One is auction and one is private treaty. And private treaty is actually the common law term for selling, not at auction. So, and like you can use all sorts of terms around that: offers closing by, best offers by, and all
Yeah.
those sort of things. But it's actually all just a private treaty. As the name suggests, the offers are made in private, and we don't share those offers. We're not allowed to. Whereas auction is the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
So they're the two methods of sale used. There are certainly many areas, locations, properties, buyers that are used to private treaty only, and particularly when the best result is achieved through a condition such as subject to finance. Private treaty with those best offers is the best method.
And I think let's move to buyers now, some advice for buyers, because I guess, you know, we see a lot of buyers come through our side on the finance that have got their pre-approvals or looking to find a property, and there is this bit of thought process with a lot of buyers that, oh, maybe I should just wait for the property prices to drop, or maybe I should just wait for things to settle down. I think that's obviously been an ongoing thought, but still there's huge demand from buyers. What would your tips and advice be to buyers? Do you think those buyers that are saying, oh, if I wait a bit, you know, it will stabilise or drop? I personally feel they're going to be waiting a long time, and I don't feel like prices will drop. But do you have some thoughts around that in terms of what advice and tips you'd give to people that are wanting to buy, whether it's a home or an investment property? What would you say to them?
Look, I think there's some people like the share market, and particularly if you live and maybe buy and sell in markets like Sydney in particular and Melbourne, which was evidenced very recently, COVID, post-COVID, Sydney went down on average by about 10%. Adelaide is steady, it always is steady, even post-COVID, like it's basically just held and or gone up. So, and based on what we've just said about supply and demand, categorically do not wait, because it will continue to go up. There was a lot of people, and I reckon the media goes to the same professor of economics every single time, and he prints his doom and gloom story that the market's going to go down 40%, and it never, ever, ever happens, particularly when you look at Adelaide, and you do need to pull us out and isolate us from all the narrative of the Eastern Seaboard media and say, what is Adelaide doing? So if you look at supply and demand, it is going to hold, if not go up, and that is, I think, almost a fact because of this chronic undersupply we've got for property. So do not wait.
Do not
and
wait.
Unfortunately,
do not procrastinate.
it'll just get harder. Interest rates don't seem to be taming it. And one of the other problems we've got in our market is that there's a lot of people buying in cash. There's people that have been in property for 30 or 40 years and have been part of all these meteoric rises. The most recent one is COVID, where we've gone up 42% in 3 years. The last time we had that growth was in the 1970s. So there's a lot of buyers that have had property and held it all through these growth periods that are flush with cash. They're the ones that every buyer has to compete with, the first homeowners and so on. And so that's what's going to keep it going, because they're not affected by interest rate rises either.
Yeah.
So get your finance sorted out. Seriously, like it's not necessarily
get the finance.
It is not
get in the door.
It is not necessarily a plug for you, Marissa, but it's true. Like talk to High Financial or any loan broker. Get that sorted.
Yeah.
Get onto it because I think it's just going to keep going.
Yeah, and I guess just switching our minds to the rental side of things, we've already really discussed that it's really hard to get a rental. Really strong demand from tenants, not enough supply of investment properties. Do you see, you've obviously got a really large portfolio of properties under management here at Turner. Do you see that rental pressure is going to continue, and do you expect rental growth, growth of rental to keep going?
Yeah,
and what's your forecast around that?
Look, it might. The actual growth of rent may soften slightly, but I think the rises we've had, which is about 10%, will continue, and that the competitiveness of trying to find rentals will be there. I think the tips for renters are certainly to go to agencies. There aren't many around, unfortunately, but agencies like Turner, where you can register as a renter. 25% of our properties are leased on Turner Real Estate before we go to the major portals. But most importantly, make your application really, really high quality. Look at it like a CV. Get good references, whatever history you need, provide it. You've got to be there right when they are first marketed. You've got to make yourself sound as appealing as possible, because that also is a competitive situation. But be onto it early, register with agencies like us that put them on our portals only as a start. And as I said, we manage almost 4,000 and we lease 25% of them just from our website. So there's hundreds of properties that are being let before going to, say, realestate.com.au.
And along the lines of putting yourself forward as the best possible chance of success, I'm guessing that one of the main criteria there is that if they have previously rented, they need to have a good track history and track record.
Yes.
And now we're finding cost of living is increasing. And so if someone's in a rental and their rent's gone up by quite a bit and their cost of living has increased, that could put some sort of financial burden on them. It's always best for them to leave that property as, early and downsize if they need to, rather than get into arrears. Like, what advice do you have around people that are sort of struggling to keep up with that cost of living to ensure that they can still get another rental easily?
I think what you said is outstanding, and it's perfect, and that's pretty much what people need to do. I think it's almost like a light bulb moment. We all need to look at what's going on here. We need to see where we are and where it's potentially going, and sort of really think about what your situation is going to be like, and be a little bit decisive. I think what generally happens, it's human nature, particularly Australian culture. She'll be right, mate.
Yeah.
And then you sort of get to that point where it hits you, and then you're taking action. And if you're doing that, if any of us are in that situation, it's not a great one. And other people are probably going to be in a similar situation, and that's when you'll probably start getting less for assets. And if you own, you own things you're wanting to sell, or you're in a situation with arrears, you'll probably find other people will be, and they'll be applying for rentals. So try and get a little bit ahead of the potential of what that your situation might be.
Well, it probably comes back to the point that you said before, Lockie. Plan, and then plan again. Whether you're a seller or a buyer, a landlord or a tenant, basically just understand all of the cost factors, understand the market, plan ahead. That's really where we're at the moment, isn't it? Just understanding everything and making sure that you have a plan.
Yeah. And for people who are looking at home loans, that's critical, right? It's all the cost of money. So talk to Rise High Financial and Marissa and her team. If you own property and you think you might be being able to get more rent, let me know. Give me a call. Just go to realestate.com.au. If you're sitting on property and you want to know what it's worth, give us a call. All of our appraisals are free. They're very thorough and ethical and honest, as you would expect. And that's just part of building your data and your information to help you make an informed decision. So we do lots of free things like that. You can register as a renter and a buyer for free. You can go and have a chat to the Rise High team for free as well. And all that stuff is all just part of what you need to plan, I think. And that's the first step for people.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes our market update for June. We'll be back with you at the end of September for another market update. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, please reach out to the team at Turner or the team at Rise High about any questions that you have about money, finance, property. We're here to help, and we'd love to support you on your journey. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
All the best, everybody.